Welcome to The Passion Pod with your host, Chris Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the feature presentation.
Season 5, Episode 9.
Welcome back, friends, for our most dangerous episode to date. Today we are sitting in Inglewood, Florida, with a bit of a social media sensation. This should be interesting, to say the least. Welcome, Garrett Galvin, a.k.a. Fishing Garrett.
Nice to be here.
Dude, thanks for letting me into your spot. This is a cool little place.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, I'm down here just like hanging out with my dad. I didn't realize I was going to run into somebody that catches like everything, I guess, gators and all that stuff. But getting into that, who are you and what are you passionate about?
My name is Garrett Galvin, and I've lived here for several years. And, well, I've lived in this, this house is actually like a warehouse, and I've turned it into a house. And my family has lived in Florida for several generations, and my grandpa has been here for a while, so we own quite a bit of property. So that really started me with the whole wildlife thing, because that's what I like to do. I like to catch wildlife, especially dangerous wildlife. I like to film. I like to save animals. Anything that needs help, like let's say like a bird breaks its wing or something, I will make a splint for the bird and take care of it myself. If I think I can do better than an expert, I will do it myself.
That's awesome. We'll get into it. So you're blowing up on social media. TikTok's like the one that's like going kind of nuts. But if people who are listening want to go follow you, if they want to try to get in contact with you, how can they best do that?
I would say if you check out my TikTok, for example, you can click the link to my Instagram, and if you DM me, I'll do my best to answer as many people as I can. If you have any crazy questions or anything, I'll try my best to answer. Just hit me up with something like an actual question, and don't just say yo or something, because I won't respond to that, because I don't know what that is. I have plenty of fake accounts hitting me up, plenty of random people.
So what's the handle for that? How can they follow it?
It's Fishing Garrett, but it's not like with two G's in the middle. It's Fishin'. So Fishin, G would be the starting of my name, Garrett.
Perfect. That's on TikTok and Instagram?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. So what was your childhood like? You just said you grew up here in Florida. Were you always into hunting, fishing, wildlife stuff? Like,
yeah,
how did that happen?
As long as I could remember. I don't know if my parents brought me into it. I think slightly, because they were very open to me, letting me handle animals and stuff. But I think I kind of took that like just naturally on my own. And at such a young age, I was doing stuff that most adults would find terrifying. Like, let's say, for example, like as an 8-year-old boy, I would jump out of the boat onto an alligator and pick it up and safely be able to handle it. And venomous snakes, I could handle venomous snakes when I was very young too. That's one thing that's super dangerous. For example, like a cottonmouth, you do not want to get bit by a cottonmouth. So you have to be very careful. So as I was young, my parents would give me advice and show me and lead me. But as I got older, I started learning for myself, and it kind of just took off from there.
Do you have like friends and stuff that were a little bit more experienced, at least at the beginning, that kind of like helped tell you like these are the snakes not to touch, these are the ones you can?
Kind of, yeah, like my dad and everything. Like they're not experts, but they're natives to Florida for 5 generations, so they know the wildlife very well. And not so much. I kind of just did that myself. But as I started getting a little bit older through high school, I met some friends. I met this one friend named Mark Lampart. And he was a big shark fisherman, and I was a fisherman. I was a big snook fisherman at the time. I did a lot of fishing and stuff, and we just started hanging out. And I went shark fishing with him a few times, and we both took off from there.
Wild. So where you grew up here in Inglewood, that's not What part did you go? Did you go right into like mangroves? Did you immediately start going on boats out into the ocean? Like what kind of wildlife stuff? Did your parents, the backyard, did it like go immediately into the woods?
Definitely the backyard is what did it for me, because we live on 20 acres.
Oh, wow.
And it's kind of like a farm life. We didn't have horses or cows or anything. My grandpa used to, but we didn't have horses or cows. But we had chickens, all kinds of different stuff. We have 3 ponds, so I did a lot of fishing in the ponds. So definitely having all of that like space like kind of led me to the environment more, for sure.
Sure. So have you had ever like a job like the rest of us that sucked, like a fast food thing?
Absolutely. I could go on and on about that. I started off, I think I was 14. I would mow lawns, And I would do a little bit of chainsaw work. I would do tree trimming and stuff. At a young age, I was playing with a chainsaw. Like let's say, for example, like a lot of kids would play with toys when they were young. I would play with something like a blowtorch or something crazy. But I was safe. I've definitely like hurt myself, like, but nothing really bad. I have no broken bones besides my fingers, but that's a different story we can get into later.
Sure. So what jobs have you had? I want to know, like, what's the summary, and we'll get into more detail, but what's kind of the summary trajectory of, like, when you were 8 years old, you're saying all of a sudden you're playing around with gators, and then, like, what jobs did you have? Now all of a sudden you're making money off TikTok. Like, kind of what were the steps to hit that?
Okay, so I did start mowing lawns and doing yard work and everything when I was like 13, 14. And by the time I was 16, I started working at Lock and Key Restaurant. It's on Minnesota Key. And I started off as a dishwasher. And for a while, it wasn't so bad, but man, when it gets busy, it is bad because they're pushing through a lot of people, and we have a really junky dishwasher. So it's extremely stressful. And I'm very like you have to push through so many dishes at one time, and it's just it's very disgusting too. Like, and I'm okay with that disgusting stuff, but there's a point where you're doing it every day and you just hate it and you just want to get out of that. But I would do bar back. I did busing.
Did you work at anywhere after that restaurant?
After that, I worked at Wetlands Management, and that's a company that sprays exotic invasive plants around wetlands and protected areas. So what I would do basically is I would get these big heavy spray packs that weigh like 80 pounds when they're full, and we would mix it between water, I think Garlon, and other chemicals. And these chemicals are actually very harmful. They were like Roundup and stuff. It's proven to like give you cancer. And I didn't like that about it because there's no way to avoid getting this stuff on you. Eventually it's going to get on your hands and stuff. And you can have cuts and stuff, and it can get into that. So that's very not, like, I don't know what to call it. Like, definitely not a safe job. And I actually have some very interesting stories about that job. But you definitely have to be tough to do it because you're walking through like swamp. Like, there's no limits to the wetlands. Like, it's not just like a wetland. You're literally, there's points where you're just wading through a pond full of alligators and stuff.
Wild. Is that when so you played with all these animals, right? Like, that was already like there, that you like that stuff? But
by that time it was fully established and I could already do everything I'm doing now, but I was still very young.
Sure. So when it all of a sudden, like, was it because of this job that the whole invasive thing came up, where all of a sudden, like, the idea of environmentalism became important?
Well, ever since I was really little, I would always watch these shows on TV of people catching these pythons and people like catching all these invasive animals, and I always wanted to do it. But I just, didn't have access to do it yet because I was very young. But the second I got access, when my buddy started driving up there to look at snakes and take pictures, because his girlfriend at the time was a photographer, and she would take like really good pictures of snakes on the road and everything, different species of snakes, and it all started there. And my buddy's like, hey, there's these crazy lizards that are around this school over here. We should look at them. He's like, you won't be able to catch them. I'm like, man, I can definitely catch them. That's all I do, man. I've caught all kinds of lizards already, like just native lizards and stuff. And I'm like, I can figure this out. But he was sure right. These lizards really fast. They're called African agamas. They're rock agamas, and all they do is sit on rocks, and they're extremely fast. They're watching you from afar. And now, over time, they've spread out over South Florida, so they're just everywhere. And I wouldn't say they really harm the environment that bad, but they definitely are overpopulating for sure.
Sure. So what are you up to these days? How did the TikTok, like, everyone has an Instagram, it seems, these days, but TikTok's obviously a little bit newer thing, and that's where, like, you have a much more significant following. How did the TikTok thing come up?
Well, it all started with Instagram, because I mainly started TikTok because I thought it could grow my Instagram following, because I had a pretty decent fishing page for a while. I've done a lot of fishing in this area and everything, and I've done mainly snook fishing with artificial. And in high school and everything, I had, a decent following of maybe 4,000 or 5,000 followers. And it just started growing, and I'm like, hey, I think I can do way better than this. And then I started hearing about this TikTok app, and I'm like, everyone says, oh, that's lame, that's a bunch of children's stuff and everything. And I'm like, yeah, this doesn't look too interesting. But then I downloaded it, and I'm like, hey, this is pretty cool. And this actually happened when I was at work. I posted one of my first few videos. I posted a possum, and I'm like, oh, this will be funny to make a joke out of this, because a lot of stuff with TikTok, the less serious you are and the more funny it is, the more people want to watch it tends to be. Because sometimes when I'm just giving information, no one cares. But if I'm making a joke, it's funny. So I see this possum on the ground, and I walk up to this wild possum that's very angry, and I start petting it on the head. And it's trying to like nip at me and stuff, just holding its mouth open, snarling. And I'm like, oh, it's a cat. I'm like, someone lost a cat. I'm like, it's a good kitty. And I'm like petting it on the head and it's just sitting there like growling and stuff. It's so funny.
And that's what blew up from there.
That's what blew up my TikTok initially, like originally, because, you know, just because it got like 6 million views on TikTok, it gets spread out to other platforms. It was on like the main feed on Snapchat. It was on different Instagram accounts, different meme pages. It just like blew up all over. People were doing like YouTube videos on it and everything. But the part that really like sucks for me is because I would want some recognition, especially from like a bigger account. Just like maybe they don't need to like, you know, like tag me all over or whatever, but just, you know, tag my Instagram or tag something so people know who this person is that made this video. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Do you remember, and this is like a random story, but do you remember that photo that went kind of everywhere for a while that was Trump with a man bun that was photoshopped? Do you remember seeing that? I
think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Somebody photoshopped that. Well, that was actually my friend Alex Unkefer.
Really?
He's a photographer, and he did that. But what sucked is when it went viral and went everywhere, nobody knew it was him.
Yeah.
And the dude who stole the credit that put it out never credited him until after the wave was totally gone.
Exactly.
And nobody cared anymore.
I can think of several times that's happened to me, man.
Right. So super frustrating.
Barstool. I had a snake video with Barstool of me. I had a 16-foot python, which is fairly big for a python out of the Everglades, and we were moving it. My buddies wanted me to take it from the Everglades to our Everglades house that we were staying at, and I'm like, okay. I throw it in my truck. We had it in this like mattress bag, and these snakes are very strong, and it ripped out of the bag. It just pushed its head right through the bag. And I'm just driving down the road, and I'm like, oh my God, this snake is coming out of the bag. And I'm like, I can't freak out. So I had to swerve over on the side of the road. And I'm like, hey, this would be a funny video. Because the snake crawled out of the truck and was climbing up on top of the truck. And I just walked over to it and just picked it up behind the head. And that video went viral like really fast. I think it got like 2 million views in the first 24 hours. And it was doing very, very well. And then all of a sudden, it's on Barstool Sports. But they DM'd me first about this, and they're like, hey, this is your video. Can we post it? I'm like, yeah, man. I'm like, all I ask is you just tag my Instagram or just tag something. And he's like, and the guy, whoever the person was like, okay. And I checked the account because a lot of fake accounts will hit you up, but this was the real Barstool Sports. And they posted it, and all they did was leave out one T at the end of Fishing Garrett, and it tagged nobody. And the next thing I know, somebody made a fake account. I still got like 2,000 or 3,000 followers. That means people like that actually dug in and actually found the real account. But if you click on it, it leads you to nothing. So people noticed this and started making fake like Fishing Garrett with one T accounts. And it was labeled at the top, I'm the snake guy. And this account got like 40,000 followers on Instagram in like such a short time. And I'm just like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
And I DM'd the guy, and he's like, he was like, oh, what are you going to do about it? Cry about it? And I'm just like, I'll just report it. And then I actually didn't even and I didn't even report it or do anything. It just got taken down.
So was there ever like a point in time where the transition like clicked in your mind that you're doing it for fun, certainly, but then all of a sudden you realize this could actually be something career-wise?
Well, yeah, I'm really starting to think about it now because now I need to start doing something because I'm getting older. But when I was young, I always wanted to like have my own TV show or something like that. But I really want to be able to control how the content is brought out because a lot of these TV shows of them handling wildlife, like besides Steve Irwin, I completely respect him in like every aspect. But a lot of these other shows, they're completely staged and fake, and it's just not genuine. Like a lot of these python hunting shows and everything, they're not actually finding these snakes this way. They're giving you false information. They're over exaggerating the weight. I've seen them. I forget the name of the show. It's the Swamp People. The people, like, I love those guys. I actually know quite a few of them, but who's ever producing that is definitely very, very off. And it doesn't even take some snake professional to notice this. When they call a snake that's obviously around 30 to 40 pounds and they're calling it 130, 140 pounds, and you see the guy pick up the bag with the snake in it, throw it over his shoulder, you just know it's not genuine.
Sure.
So the point I'm trying to make is I want to be able to make real content, because it would be easy for me to collect snakes and make a fake video of something crazy, a snake in the toilet or something like, that someone else has done. oh, there's a gator in my bathtub. How did it get there? You know, and you obviously fake the video and put it there. I want to be able to actually get real content and also make it interesting without just clickbaiting everything and showing everyone just fake videos like everyone else does on YouTube, for example.
Sure. Are you just trying to make it strictly for entertainment purposes because it's kind of like wild for people to see, or are you trying to educate in a certain kind of way?
I want to have a mixture of both. I want to be able to make jokes and stuff and have like a good time and make it like more for like entertainment, but I also want it to educate people. I don't want to make it strictly educational where it's just talking about the animal the whole time, but I want to have at least some educational stuff so people know. And like especially with certain animals in particular, I'll educate more on them because some people are completely misinformed about them, so to speak, like rattlesnakes, like different stuff like that. Just animals that they think like are way more dangerous than they are or whatever. Then I'll point something out that they're not actually that bad. They won't chase after you like everyone says. It's not going to try to kill you.
Well, and one idea, and maybe I'm just like totally off, that could be cool. You were talking to me about it off mic about how a lot of the educational stuff doesn't get quite as much engagement, which is okay, you know, to still have it peppered in. But it could be cool if you, one of the big things, I guess, I think, which is probably why you get flagged, is when you put something up that's like dangerous, is then people want to reenact, you know, like that's what the scary part is. But if you put a video before or after it, that's more of an educational thing. So it's like, look, I know what I'm doing with this stuff. This is dangerous. I'm not telling you to do it. These are the cool things about this animal, but then also throw the other one out there that's going to do really well.
Exactly.
Like, could be a cool balance.
I've tried stuff like that, but it's very, I don't know, it's very unpredictable what videos they'll flag. Let's say, like, for example, I'll stick my hand in an alligator's mouth and touch the bottom jaw, and his mouth will slam shut, and it'll come inches from hitting my fingers. And that won't get a safety warning on TikTok. It won't, like, I can say, don't try this at home all I want. Or I can say it in the comments, and everyone's like, obviously. And I'm like, yeah, I just say that so they don't take it down. But they won't take it down, and they won't even put a warning label on it. But then let's say I find a baby squirrel on the ground, and I pick up this baby squirrel, and it's just a cute little, like a baby squirrel in my hand. And it'll get flagged. It'll get a danger warning flag on it. It'll get like one of those warnings that says this could cause serious injury. And I'm like, how does that happen? It doesn't make any sense to me, and I don't know who's running it. But
yeah, well, I mean, it's something that needs to evolve over time. It's not like TV where like the systems are really set up. So it's tough. I think it's like it's an industry that if you want to be really involved in and watch it grow and grow with it like that, there's just going to be a lot of hiccups like anything that's relatively new.
Yeah, I'll have to definitely. I've learned to like kind of like coexist with it, but it is very tricky because I never know if my video is going to get taken down because sometimes it just gets taken down randomly. But you know, they still treat me right sometimes. Sometimes I make a video and I'm like, hey, this is going to do really good. It's definitely not going to get taken down. It can't. And then it goes viral and it does really well for me.
Yeah, so everyone's going to go check it out because I was looking at, well, you were showing it to me because I don't personally use TikTok, but or your Instagram for that matter too.
You can promote your show on it.
Well, that for sure, but it is a wild channel to check out. Before we get into all the stories, because that's really like, honestly, that's the main reason I want to talk to you because you have wild ones. But like, why do you do this stuff? What are your goals? What are you trying to do?
I just love doing this. I want to be able to make money doing this, but my ultimate goal would be I would like to purchase or conserve lots of land in Florida because over the last few years, especially like this decade, all they do is build houses, and more people want to move to Florida, and that's fine, but they need to be able to figure out how to have this land without destroying everything because there's tons of wildlife. It's not just people on this world. There's tons of wildlife. When they clear all this land, it kills everything around it. It moves animals all out of the area. And if we continue on this path of just destroying every single clump of woods around, we're not going to have anything left. And I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't be affected by that, but a lot of people would too. Yeah. And if there's no animals left, it's not going to be the same world it was.
Right. Well, and part of conservation too is hunting and fishing and things like that. And you have these people that are like really animal rights, and a lot of times, you know, they're a little not as educated as they could be when they're talking about a subject, and they're like, "Look, what are you doing? Just like grabbing this python." But then you were talking to me off mic about like, "Look, this is an invasive species that if we don't get rid of these things or try to combat the numbers, a lot of other animals are going to suffer significantly." And
that's one thing I'd like to point out. When I said TV shows exaggerate stuff, they're not exaggerating the numbers of these pythons. They are actually out of control, and it's destroying a one-of-a-kind place. There's not another place on Earth like the Everglades. And if you take something like a python that eats everything and it just reproduces unlimitedly. It just completely destroys everything. Now you have nothing but skinny alligators that are 200 pounds lighter than a 10-foot alligator should be.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I mean, like I said, I hopefully people can listen to this and then realize, like, look, this entertainment, like, is part of it.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, like, we need more people like you that are doing these things that are really benefiting a lot of people. You know, you were talking about, like, one of the goals you wanted to have. This was off mic. I was talking to you about the whole gator thing, and you're like, look, I want to be able to relocate alligators.
Yeah.
I want to be able to catch these pythons and stuff because it's really important for these species. You know what I mean? And for the whole environment, this is going to be important to be able to, like, conserve this in the right kind of way. So I met you through your younger brother. So I went to this kava bar down here, which they sell kava and kratom drinks and stuff. And apparently kratom's illegal in Wisconsin, where I'm from, because I've never even heard of these things. It's just kind of like to tell some of my homies what this is. It's like a really laid back beach bar that it's not alcohol, but it just like gets you slightly more relaxed. I don't know. It's cool. It's like a hippie hangout kind of thing.
I've never been there. I'd like to go there.
Dude, it's tight. We got to go. Yeah, it's super cool. Anyway, so I was playing chess randomly because I have a chessboard with your younger brother, and I was talking about my show, and he's like, dude, you got to interview my older brother. And I'm like, why? Because people do that to me all the time. You got to interview this person. I'm like, tight, but like, who are they?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, he's huge on TikTok. And I'm like, I don't even use TikTok, but whatever. So then he shows me stuff on his phone, and I'm like, yeah, I want to talk to somebody who grabs 20-foot pythons with their bare hands. That's tight. But anyway, so I was talking to him, and he's like, you got to ask him a couple of things. He's like, you got to talk to him about filming sharks. So what's up with filming sharks? Can you tell me the story behind that?
Okay, so on Amazon Prime, there's this new show called Goliath Fishing, and my buddy is a filmer, and he started kind of with me, but he was more into the filming aspect. And I'm surprised we never stayed together and filmed with each other, but we have a little bit. But he started working with this charter captain that wanted to start a TV show, and they were going around all across Florida catching different fish. And it's just like another fishing show, but we wanted to make this content really good. And they asked me, hey, do you want to be my underwater camera guy? And I'm like, yeah, man. I'm like, I've done a lot of diving and free diving and stuff, but I'm not so comfortable with an underwater camera. I don't know how to use one of these things. And they're like, oh, no problem. We'll show you. And I'm like, okay, I'm down. So it started off with me just getting in the water when they would catch these giant, like 400-pound Goliath groupers. And when they would be pulling them up, I would swim down like up to 40 feet as far as I could and try to film as much of this fish as I could of it rising up. And I would be all around this fish and everything in the water. And I like I said again, I wasn't very experienced, and I didn't have all these skills of filming and stuff like that. But like I got the hang of it like pretty quick. But the camera has so many settings, and so we had to redo a lot because one setting was off and the video was blurry, and you can't have that on a TV show, so we had to redo that. And we did one episode on the East Coast in Jupiter, Florida, where we were feeding these sharks with a big bait bucket, and we were diving with these sharks. And I've dove with sharks before when I've done my spearfishing and stuff, and I've been swimming with sharks before, but not to this caliber to where the sharks are in a feeding frenzy all around you. So definitely that goes to something I wasn't comfortable doing. Like everything else that I've done, completely comfortable, but I don't know the behavior of the sharks well enough to predict what's going to happen. So it's kind of sketchy, so to speak. A lot of people wouldn't even enter the water with these sharks, but I'll admit I was very nervous, but I slid into the water, and I slid into water just a little bit too much commotion when I slid into the water, and sure enough, I was surrounded by sharks. And there's probably 15 lemon sharks around me, which is no big deal, but these lemon sharks aren't scared of people, and they're just all over. I got bumped, and I turned around, there's a shark to the left of me, a shark to the right of me. Big bull sharks, big 400 or 500-pound bull sharks all around me, and bull sharks are nothing to mess with. They're not scared of you at all. And I don't want people to get the wrong idea that sharks are going to like attack you, because they definitely weren't trying to attack you, but they definitely will check you out. They're like, what is this weird thing? And the expert, I wasn't informed about this. This is just how unprepared we were. I didn't have the right fins, so I'm barefooted. And the expert that we went with is very like explaining how like, oh, you can't have open skin. Like the sharks are going to bite that. And I'm just like, oh man, I don't have anything. I don't have a wetsuit or anything. I just have regular swim trunks and shirtless. and I'm just like a white boy, and I'm just glowing underwater, and that just looks like a magnet to the sharks. But the guy that was running the show wasn't going to stop me from doing that.
Wow.
But we jumped into the water and everything, and when I first got into the water, the shark just surrounded me, and they ignored everyone else and went right over to me. And the expert went around me and tried to get him away from me so much. And then all of a sudden the expert's like, hey, you should probably get out of the water because these sharks are targeting you to the point where you might get bit. And I'm just like, all right. And I go to get out of the water, and when you get to the edge of this boat with these sharks, they people feed them. Like, I don't know who's feeding them, but people feed them off the side of the boat a lot. So when you have a limb hanging in the water, they'll bite it for sure. They'll bite a hold of it and rip your whole leg off if you let them. But they don't know they're biting you. They just think they're grabbing a fish. They, just like.
Right.
So when you get to the edge of the boat, I have to fly out of the water, and they're like reaching to pull me up, but they didn't need to do that because I launched out of that water.
Crazy.
But we also had to get, after that, they wanted to catch one for the TV show. And I'm like, okay, you're going to have to get back in the water. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, I just like calmed down after all that stress. And I'm like, okay, I'll get back in the water. But a lot of the sharks left after they hooked one of these giant lemon sharks, and they were going to do a tagging thing on it so they can collect research on this shark. So they catch this one big lemon shark, and I get into the water with this thing, and I'm filming it, and everything's going good. There's a shark behind me when I'm filming this thing, and I'm like, what is this thing doing? It keeps coming up behind me and then turning around. And I'm just focusing on this shark that's on the line because its mouth is going all over. And there's actually a short clip where that shark almost latched onto me because it did a weird twist with its body, and sure enough, there's a bunch of teeth right in my face, right on the camera.
Wow.
But everything went good. I'm still alive. I didn't get bit. It was very sketchy, though. I would love to do that again in a more professional manner, because a lot of those guys didn't know what they were doing. The shark expert did. And, I wouldn't say everything went smoothly, but it was definitely something to experience, and I would love to do that again. I would love to swim with sharks again. I just would prefer to do it with the right gear and do it safer than the way I did it.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, sometimes people are just trying to get a shot. So
yeah.
So that's story number one, anyways.
Yeah.
So let's get to the next one. You were telling me about another like invasive species, and you showed me a picture of this thing, and it's called a arapaima. What can you describe what that thing is, and then tell me the story behind that?
They're quite popular on River Monsters on Animal Planet. The Jeremy Wade guy has actually caught quite a few of them. It's like a giant prehistoric fish with it's covered in bony scales. They can get, I think, upwards of 500 pounds, 7-8 feet long. There's tons of people that say they can get bigger, but I haven't seen it yet, so I'm not going to say that. But they can live in Florida, but they're from the Amazon, so they don't really reach across Florida quite as much as people would think, because when it gets cold in Florida, they'll die. So if it's a deeper water that they can get down to where it's still warm, they can live in certain areas. But we actually found a pond that's abandoned. It was in an old cow pasture, and this pond had a creek that led to an old place where they used to farm these things. They have farms where they can sell the meat and everything, and it's quite a valuable fish, upwards of $10,000 if it's a fully grown fish. And so these things are quite precious and everything, and they're quite endangered in their environment and everything. So it's just a very valuable fish. And we were fishing, and I was just like, I wasn't even like, I just heard they were in that pond and everything, and I wasn't quite expecting to like just hook up to one right away. But I just threw out. I actually had the guy that from the Shark TV show actually gave me this fishing rod, and I had a big plopper that I found in my barn, and it's from like the 80s, and it's just not something that you would expect to handle a big fish, rusty and just not the best, but it's what I had at the time, so I threw it on there, and I was just plopping it, and it sounded like you dropped a 5-gallon bucket full of like concrete off of a bridge. It made such of an explosion on this thing, and I set hook on this fish, and believe it or not, I've caught quite a few big fish, and I wouldn't say it was super fast and powerful, but it's just a dead weight. And I brought this thing in, and that wasn't the hard part. Handling this fish was the hard part, because these things have been known to kill people because they can jump, and when they hit you with their bony head, they can completely break your chest cavity or break your neck or whatever they hit. They'll just crush it with their huge head. But we safely handled this thing, and we got it on the shore, and we have this thing shaking around on the bank They can actually breathe air, so they can take in oxygen from the air. So having them out of the water longer than other fish is okay. Like, I'm not saying like a ridiculously long time, but upwards of like 10 minutes wouldn't hurt the fish. And we got this fish, and it has all these treble hooks from the lure in its mouth. And I'm like, whoa, 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 because I've handled a lot of tarpon, and when they shake their head around and they have treble hooks in their mouth, you will get that treble hook completely buried in your skin, and you do not want to be connected to the fish and your hand at the same time, because it'll just rip you in the water, and it could be bad. And I take a step back. I'm like, whoa, 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 I need to do this carefully. And I'm just slowly prying at it. And my buddy's like, you're taking too long. Come here. And he reaches his hand in there and grabs it. I'm like, no, don't do that. He's going to shake. And sure enough, he shook right when he grabbed a hold of that hook and started snatching it. And that old rusty treble hook buried into his hand. All 3 prongs just all the way through his thumb and out the other side. And one of them didn't go out the other side. When it goes through and out, then you can just cut the end off and it'll slip right back through. But one just buried so deep in his thumb. And it didn't stop us. He just we just disconnected the lure from the fish, and we just figured out what we were doing, and that didn't even bother us. We just had to finish what we were doing first, and that was like something else we could worry about later, and the whole hook in his hand. So after we we were like, oh yeah, we have this hook in his hand, and he's like, yeah man, I can't feel my hand. And I'm like, oh yeah dude, we forgot about that, let's go handle that. And we're like, oh, we're not going to go to the hospital because that's going to take a lot of time and it's going to cost a bunch of money when we can actually do this ourselves. So we went back to my fish hut back at my house, and we got pliers and we just ripped it out of there. But it was very deep, and that's the short story of it.
Wild. I don't suggest that people do it themselves, but
now people, there's quite a few people that have been like sneaking into some of the places where they farm them and catch them, and that's not cool.
Right.
You definitely shouldn't do that. I'm not like against it or whatever, but I just think like it makes it look like that's what I did when I actually didn't do that.
Right.
And it makes it, it's not legal.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that and the hook thing too. Like, man,
that was definitely
rough.
preventable. He learned his lesson. I tried to tell him. I just knew because I've caught tons of big tarpon from land on artificials with big sharp hooks. I use jigs that have huge, heavy hardened steel hooks. So when you catch this tarpon and you're grabbing it, they can break your wrist when they have all their energy and you shove your hand like in their gills to hold on to them and they start to shaking, they can snap your wrist completely.
Yeah. So in general, again, go check out Fishing Garrett's stuff, but don't try to do jump in.
Don't do
and
any of
that
the stories.
So obviously you tend to be a little bit reckless, which part of it's because you're young, I think, where you're a little more willing to take the risk. But it seems to be working out.
It's going to get worse as I get older.
Hopefully not too horrible. But he just had that hook, right? So have you had any really significant injuries? There's a video I watched quickly, like not far back on your Instagram, where like a massive snake almost got you.
Yeah, I actually have a scar on my leg from that same snake. I was letting one of my buddy actually caught this snake. I can't take the credit for catching this giant snake. This snake could have potentially been the record. We decided not to turn it in. He just wanted to keep it quiet because we catch quite a few snakes, and a lot of it goes unnoticed on social media, and it has to be that way sometimes because people will catch on and start copying what you're doing and be in the same area that you're in, and it can just cause a major problem. But we want to work together to catch these snakes, but we also don't want to make it to where it's not helping anyone catch snakes. So we kept this somewhat secret of what we did with this snake, but we have to put down the snake. I personally won't kill a snake, but my buddies put down this snake and we skinned it out. But before that is when I was letting one of my other friends hold this giant snake, and it has a huge head on it. And when we were holding this big snake, I walked past him when he was holding it, and they're so strong. These snakes are way stronger than you are, and it can just pull forward, and it just launched out of his hands. He held onto it, but it launched him forward with the snake, and it latched right onto my foot. And then I just started gushing blood everywhere, and I was just like, all right, no big deal. And then I just took the snake from him. I'm like, you don't get this snake anymore. He's like, I'm sorry, man, I've done this a lot. And I'm like, oh yeah, sure. I wasn't mad at him, but I was just like, come on, man, now I can't say I never get bit.
Dang. What? So did you? Was that the most significant injury you had?
No, definitely not. That was nothing. I just bled everywhere and everything. I still have a scar. I had one of the tooth stuck in my leg. But a lot of my injuries came when I was younger. Let's see. At my pond, I have this big rope swing that I built, and I'm a very good tree climber. I know that sounds kind of weird, but I can really climb some trees because a lot of the times I have to climb trees to catch some invasive animals. But I climbed up this tree, and I was like, I think I was like 10 when I first initially put up this rope. And the reason I went up into that tree is because I had a pet raccoon at the time. And this pet raccoon was just a baby, and he didn't know any better. And he would climb to the top of the tree, and he wouldn't come down because he gets scared. So he would just sit up there for hours, and I can't leave him there overnight when he's that young. So I had to climb up there when I think I was like 10 years old. I had to climb up there, and I got him down. And I told my brother, I'm like, hey, get a rope. We can make a rope swing here. So that's how we got this rope swing put up. And we would swing on this thing all the time and have so much fun. But one day I'm like, hey, I have a great idea. And this is by this time I think I was 15. I'm like, I have a great idea. I can actually climb onto one of these branches that's way past the rope, and then it can actually slingshot you out even higher. And I got completely slingshot by this rope from climbing up into the tree. So you climb up into the tree, and then you jump off that branch holding this rope, and it will swing you out so high. And I would do this all the time and have so much fun. But one day I'm like, okay, so I'm going to start jumping into the pond from like 30 feet from a 30-foot drop. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. And I went to swing out, and I could see I was about 30 feet down. All I see under me is a bunch of rocks. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to drop like that. So I swung back, and when you swing back, it swings you back really hard, and it pulled my arms loose, and it just hung my ankle out far enough for me to hit this sharp rock that's at the end of this. So I just swung right into this sharp rock, and I immediately just like it hit the side of my ankle so hard, man, and it just put a huge chunk out of my leg. And I could see like the tendon in my leg. It just put like this nice hole. It wasn't even bleeding. And I'm just like, whoa, that's bad. And I'm like, okay, it's no big deal. And I start walking on my leg, and then all of a sudden it starts like really burning. And I'm like, oh, this is bad. And then like after a while it swelled up so bad I couldn't walk. And I didn't want to go to the hospital. I refused to go to the hospital, but my mom ended up making me go to the hospital. And they checked out my leg, and it wasn't broken, but I lacerated the muscle in my calf, and I definitely had a little bit of tissue damage. But that wasn't, I don't know if that's my worst injury, but that's definitely a big mistake I made that hurt really bad. And I learned my lesson. I'll still go on that rope swing, but best believe I'm going to keep my arms pulled up high enough next time.
Jesus. Well, I mean, the fact that you've been able to like handle all these gators and stuff without getting, a hand bit off is pretty amazing. Let's get to the next story. Same thing. Your brother told me about a wild pig, or probably a bunch of wild pigs. What was that thing?
Okay, so this actually just recently happened. This wasn't too long ago. This was like 2.5, 3 weeks ago. My buddy, one of my snake buddies that we go down and catch, his name's George, and he comes down to Englewood because he has a girlfriend down here, so he's always down here. And he's over here in the Salt Flats area, and he loves hunting. He's a Cuban, and he loves hunting. And his family does a lot of African hunts before that became completely like unmoral and everything. But his dad used to be a big African hunter, so he grew up hunting and everything. So he goes out hunting these hogs, and I do too. I get hogs for my alligators all the time, but he tells me, he's like, man, I shot this hog and it ran away. And he's like, dude, these pigs attacked me. And I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, I'm sure, dude. Because usually when someone tells me that, like, I know he doesn't really over-exaggerate because he does the same stuff I do. But when he says they attacked him, I'm like, okay, so that means he pissed him off and they charged him. And he just walked away and no big deal. But I wasn't expecting what I was about to walk into when we went to look for this pig he shot. We went to look for this pig he shot, and first of all, you can't really get into this spot because it's the thickest of thick mangroves you could ever walk through. So I'm crawling through a little coon hole that the pigs walk through and everything. And I brought my handgun. I brought 6 rounds in the handgun just as an emergency in case the pig was still alive and we needed to put it down. Because I don't want the pig to suffer. I don't want to have to drag it back alive. I want the invasive hog to just die peacefully, and I don't want it to suffer. So I just brought the handgun just in case for safety. And we start treading through this trail, and immediately I see this big boar, and it just walks right beside me, and it's chomping its teeth, and it's acting, it's posturing on me, acting kind of aggressive. And I'm like, oh, wow. I'm like, oh, you weren't kidding. There actually is pigs here. And we kept going, and it got worse and worse. There was more pigs, and I couldn't see them because it's so thick, but you could hear them walking all around you, and they're circling us. And I've never seen pigs act like this. I've handled pigs a lot, and it was just a pack of boars, just a bunch of male angry hogs, all skinny and nasty hogs. And we heard squealing, and we're like, what the heck is going on? And these pigs were grunting and making these weird sounds I've never heard pigs make for no reason. They were making the sound of when a hog dog gets a hold of them and they squeal at the top of their lungs, but this pig was squealing like that for no reason, and we weren't sure why. I talked to a few professionals, like actual professionals, and they told me that a cougar may have got it. And I'm like, it's just very unlikely that a cougar is out there, for one thing, and it's got the hog. So I'm just still not sure to this day what that squealing was all about. But we came out to this clearing, and then out of nowhere, this pig comes right after me. And it hits me in the side of the leg. Didn't hurt me, but it battering rammed me, and I just shot it right in the back of the head. And the pig died. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, I didn't want to, like, I don't need this much meat. What are we going to do? And then my buddy's like, oh, no big deal. But like, there's still hogs all around us. And I'm like, now they're circling us and they're mad. And you think the gunshots would scare away pigs, but it didn't. It just made them mad. And they kept coming after us, man. And I ended up shooting all 6 rounds, and I took down 3 of them. And my buddy brought his handgun too, but he only brought a couple bullets, and he ended up shooting them all up. So it was all me. And I had like my last bullet. This pig charged me, and I shot it in the head, and it did not die. I shot it with a 40, my Glock 40, in the head with hollow points, and it did not die. And my buddy kicked it because it was still charging us, and he kicked it in the side of the head, and then we flipped it over and stuck him up under the armpit near the heart, and it bled out. And this is bad because we're so thick at this point. Like, I didn't explain, but we walked so far in this woods. Like, if we didn't have phones, we'd get lost out there for sure. Even I would get lost, and I can navigate through the woods, but it was bad. And I'm like, what are we going to do? We have 2 dead pigs. I have blood all over my hands. I'm like, what are we going to do? And sure enough, these pigs are still coming out after us. I'm out of ammo. I don't know what I'm doing. And I run up this mangrove tree. I climb to the top of this mangrove tree just to wait, because I'm like, hey, I can call my buddy. He can bring more ammo. He can come down here with his friends, and we can drag these hogs out before we have too many hogs. We don't need this much meat. And I waited for my buddy, and I hear this girl talking, and it's George's girlfriend. And my buddy brought him. I'm like, no, don't bring the girls. You don't want to bring them. They will get destroyed out here. But because they're just little, they're little teenage girls. They're just going to completely get demolished by these hogs if the hogs see them. And so we got them to go back. And then my buddy came into the middle of it, one of my other buddies, and he got chased up the tree too. And then he hands me that ammo. And then I jump out of the tree and I shoot another pig. And then I gave my buddy some ammo, and so he had ammo, but I ran completely out of ammo, and then I ended up climbing back up the tree because I'm just trying to avoid getting cut by these things, because these things have nasty cutters. They can actually cut you really, really bad and seriously hurt you. So when I climbed up this tree, the branch broke, and I fell like 12 feet, landed right on top of this hog, and I grabbed it by the ears, and he cut me right across the leg. But I ended up my handgun, the clip, it was just a mess. I was very not expecting this. My handgun, the magazine fell out and everything. So I had a knife and I stuck the pig, and then my buddy grabbed him over and flipped him over, and then we properly put him down. But this pig wouldn't go down, and I don't know why. But it was just a really big boar, and it just shows you how tough they are. They're almost bulletproof.
So how did you get out of it? That was the last one, and then the others just kind of scattered?
No, they were still around. We just managed to get, like, we weren't trying to kill them. If I wanted to, I could have just kept walking. I could have got all the ammo and just kept walking around and shooting them all, but I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to get these 4. At this point, we had 4 hogs. I wanted to get these 4 hogs out of here, and we had more people come, so are like, okay, we can drag these things out. And the whole time we're dragging them through these mangroves, it's very hard because these mangroves have roots that stretch out all over. So we're dragging them up and over all these roots, and these hogs are just following us back. And they followed us for probably a mile, man. And we got to the end of this, and they just stopped at the gate we crawled through, and they just circled right there. And like, we could just hear off in the distance more and more hogs were coming from farther away, and we're like, oh my gosh, that was insane.
Of all the stuff you'd done, did you really think that pigs were going to be the ones that were going to scare the hell out of you?
No, definitely not. It definitely wasn't more scary than the sharks, because the sharks I was scared for my life because I could die in a feeding frenzy.
Yeah, well, yeah,
but that was very unexpected, so to speak. Like, if I would go into that situation again, definitely, but I would bring more ammo and definitely bring a better knife and just be more prepared for that, because I wasn't like I'm sure if a lot of hog guys, the guys that trap hogs, hear this story, they're gonna kind of question this story, because I would question this story if someone told me this story, because I know how people can over exaggerate and everything. But I can tell you what, if one of those guys are there, they would have experienced it. And if they had one of their hog dogs, would have got torn up by those pigs for sure, because there was way too many of them. I don't even know how many of them there were. There was quite a few.
Crazy. Yeah, I don't stray off the trail like that, so I've never had any experiences like that.
That picture is on my Instagram.
Oh, yeah, with all the boars.
They're stacked up on. We ended up giving the meat to my buddy's family. He has quite a few family members, and all the meat has already been eaten. It's been like 3 weeks, and all the meat's already been completely eaten.
Well, now it's time to go get more hogs.
Yeah.
So anyway, what's something that you learned about wildlife? I mean, just to get away from all the crazy stories, what's something you learned about wildlife that you want people to know, or you think people should really be aware of?
Okay, so this is a big one for me because, like I was saying, how more and more people are moving to Florida and they're tearing up habitat. The main animal that I've noticed, especially in Englewood, Florida, and different areas, is the eastern diamondback rattlesnake. Now, that is the United States' biggest venomous snake is the eastern diamondback rattlesnake, and it's a one-of-a-kind snake, and it's a very important snake for Florida's ecosystem. And over the past few years, especially more when I was younger, I would see them naturally everywhere. And now that they're tearing up their environment everywhere, you just don't see them anymore, man. You can see one, like, occasionally. Like, my buddy just saw one the other day, but you just don't see them like you used to. And their numbers are going to keep going down until there's none left. And I really think FWC should take steps to protect this animal. But it's kind of like one of those situations where it's an extreme... This is, like, one of the top dangerous snakes in America right now. And this snake can kill you. So... they want to be able to protect the public and protect the snake at the same time. So whenever someone sees one of these snakes, their first instinct is, oh, I have kids, so I'm going to kill this snake so it doesn't bite my kids. When I really wish they could just leave the snake alone and the snake would disappear. Like, it's very rare you're going to see a snake in your yard, and there's steps you can take to making your yard less appealing to snakes. And I just wish, it's kind of like a tricky situation, but I would wish less and less people would just purposely kill them for no reason, just because they're becoming less common. If they were a very abundant animal, you could harvest them and it would be fine because it wouldn't damage anything. But with an animal that's slowly declining in population, it's just not good to see them constantly die. And I'm not sure exactly what the answers are for this, because they are very dangerous and people have to kill them sometimes because they're in your pool cage and you have children, you have to kill the snake. And I understand that, but I just think there's a lot of situations where people think they need to kill it and there's other solutions. It's very few opportunities you're going to get to, like, let the snake live for a normal person. But for me, there's many things I could do to make sure the snake lives.
Yeah, I mean, in general, again, like, animal rights, talks, when you talk to somebody about animal rights, what really is tough with those conversations is, like, realistically, we all pretty much agree. Nobody's trying to harm anybody. No one's trying to hurt anybody. Nobody wants to torture animals. That's not the thing. But the difference is that, because, like, my dad worked for the Department of Natural Resources, is like, with deer or fish or anything else, it's about being able to keep the ecosystem the way that it's supposed to be. Exactly. And sometimes that means you need to hunt certain animals, or you need to leave other animals alone. Like, there's a reason that these rules exist. And what sucks is, like, a lot of us just aren't educated enough to know, like, what's really the right thing to be doing in these situations. And it's just about, like, getting that information out to people.
And what I've learned from over time is a lot of these experts that actually work on wildlife and FWC and everything, they really, when it comes down to it, they may be book smart and they may have all this knowledge and information, but when they're actually out there, they don't really have the experience, like the actual wildlife experience. They don't get to see the wildlife as much as you would if you were someone that's been out there their whole life experiencing it. And I'm totally open to hunting, and, like, deer hunting needs to happen in all states because deer will completely overpopulate, and that's definitely an important step. But I'm also one of those guys that won't kill something if it doesn't need to die. Like, let's say, like, bobcats, like bobcat hunting. That's okay. Like, if you want to shoot a bobcat, that's no big deal. Just don't, like, I just see, like, a lot of my buddies and everything, I've hung out with a lot of people that aren't so sensitive towards killing animals. They won't kill anything, but they'll kill way more animals than I would. And I just try to avoid killing animals at all costs. The only animals I don't mind killing is hogs, for an example. And I'll shoot one deer a year in Georgia, but I never go crazy. I just get what you need.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? I mean, some people do it exclusively for the sport. But again, if you want that sport to exist, you need to be able to conserve where it comes from in the first place. You need to be able to prevent
and
protect that.
I definitely don't support animal rights activists like whatsoever. Like PETA, for example. I do not support anything they say because all they do is push out false information.
Yeah, well, like I said, what sucks, I think, is a lot of people that attach to stuff like that. It's not out of a bad place. It's just out of misinformation.
Yeah, exactly. And their heart's in the right place, and they're trying to like save these animals. Like people that follow PETA and support PETA, I understand. But when they are just like doing nothing but like just sending out false information, like I can't go through one of their posts without finding something that's just completely false.
Right. Yeah. So.
And they've actually blocked me when I've tried to correct them. So I'm actually blocked by PETA's main company on both of their accounts. And I just tried to give them information, and I started a big problem in the comments, and they ended up banning me for it.
So you have a bunch of stuff with alligators.
Oh.
How does somebody go about wrestling an alligator?
Yes, man. Alligators are one of my favorites. I can't say they're my number one favorite because I like everything, but they're definitely an animal that I have the most experience with and something I've been around my whole life. And let's see, like, how does someone go about wrestling an alligator? It's not something you want to just start off doing. It's not something you could ever just learn like on your own from like the beginning. And that's kind of what I did, because I started when I was very little. My dad and everything would catch me like baby alligators, and I would hold them and everything and get used to them. I actually got bit. My first time I got bit by an alligator, I was 8 years old. And I would hold this like 3-foot alligator, and I would carry it around with me. And I wouldn't recommend doing this, but I would just carry this alligator around with me and make it my pet and be friends with it and everything. And I would just carry it around. And I'm like, oh, I don't like the tape on its mouth. Let's take the tape off of its mouth so it can, so it's not restrained. And I would take the tape off of its mouth, and it just holds its mouth open. It would totally bite you, but I knew how to keep my fingers away. But I don't remember what I did, but I was 8 years old, and I stuck my thumb ended up in its mouth, and it bit down so hard, man. And it actually, like, it crushed my thumb pretty good, but my mom, like, started freaking out, and she's like, ah! And my mom's like, you gotta poke its eyes. That's what they say. And I'm like, no, I'm not gonna gouge its eyes out because I made a mistake. Like, if it was life or death, like with a bigger alligator, you gotta do what you gotta do to survive. But I wouldn't poke its eyes out because it had my thumb, because I was stupid and got bit. Even when I was little, I wouldn't do that. And my mom got these like 2 pieces of mulch in our planter, and she started like prying its mouth open, and all it did was just bite down 3 times harder with all of its force. And just think, like, a 3-foot alligator still has quite a bit of force behind its bite. It's very small, but it still has quite a powerful bite for a little lizard. And eventually we got it out just enough to where I could get my thumb out of the alligator, and I was perfectly fine. But I bled a lot, and I didn't change how I felt about handling alligators. The next day I would be holding them. I just knew I did something wrong. It wasn't the alligator's fault it bit me. It's my fault. If I ever get bit by an alligator, it's something I did. It's not something the alligator did. It's just defending itself. And I understood that when I was young, but I started upgrading as I got older to bigger and bigger and bigger. And now I love the bigger alligators so much.
Do you just go out to find them, to interact with them and do video stuff with them? Or like, what are you trying to do
with them?
Yes, I
do. I have an uncle in Ocala, and he has a big alligator farm. And I didn't start going there till I was older, but that's a place I can handle alligators legally without worrying, because they're federally protected, and you can't just go out messing with alligators. That's a big crime. I've had FWC come to my house multiple times because of my videos, because they think I'm just harassing an alligator or something like that, and I'm really not. Like, let's say I was feeding an alligator in a farm, like that one video I showed you with the salmon, the one that went the most viral. I think it got like 24 million views, and that video got FWC, a private investigator, to come to my house and interrogate me with 2 guys. And I had to protect my uncle's identity and tell them that it was legal at the same time. And it was a very tricky situation, but I ended up getting off with just a warning, and I didn't get any violations. And I cannot get any violations in the wildlife community, because that will prevent me from getting a Python contracting license. I won't be able to do that, and I wouldn't be able to get permits to catch alligators in either of these counties if they give me violations with alligators, because they don't want anyone with violations. And that kind of will interfere with people when they have those rules for, like, let's say for the python hunting, for example, when they have rules of no wildlife violations. You kind of, by having that rule, you kind of just eliminated everyone that's good, because all those guys have been handling animals their whole lives and they have the most experience, but they broke the law one time and they got a ticket for it. And now they don't want them they don't want them catching pythons. So it's kind of a tricky situation. But a lot of these python hunters they're hiring are people from up north that are very inexperienced, and it's good that they're learning and everything. But I just wish they would hire more experienced people that could actually get the highest numbers, like some of my friends.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, if you allow somebody who has a violation to be a part of it, then you're being too lenient in a way in their eyes. But at the same time, you're eliminating all the people that have a lot of experience. So it's kind of, I totally understand where you're coming from.
I feel like they could individually pick people depending on who they are, not just swoop everybody out in one foul swoop, because then they're eliminating some of the best hunters, because five good hunters could catch more than 500 bad hunters.
Sure. Or maybe they have it like a time frame where it's like 3 years after or 5 years after, or just in general, maybe it's something that they could look at.
They definitely have some kind of rules. There's a lot of different. It's very complicated. Too much for me to understand. I can talk to all the guys that work there and everything, but some of them don't even know everything. All the rules.
So obviously we're gonna keep seeing crazy videos and different things from
Absolutely.
you. But what's next for you? What can people kind of expect to see from you in the coming weeks, months, years? Like, what's gonna happen?
I'm working on getting an alligator trapping license so I can be able to remove alligators from people's yards and stuff. People that have nuisance alligators. Let's say if you live in a home community and you have an alligator that's getting a little bit too big and it's starting to scare people and it could take out someone's dog, then they would call me to remove it. They would call FWC, and then FWC would contract me to remove the alligator. And then I can go and remove the alligator, and I can preferably relocate it, because I don't want to kill the alligator, because most of the time when you're removing these alligators, they're not even like a dangerous alligator. It's just an alligator that's chilling in a pond. But I'm going to have to accept the fact that there are plenty of alligators, and I'm going to have to sell some of the alligators to farmers that are going to probably use the meat and the skin. But as little as possible, I'll do that. But I also need to be able to make money doing this.
Yeah, so it's kind of like tied up in both.
And I don't like killing alligators, but at the same time, when it's a very abundant animal, it's not bad. Like we were saying with the whole hunting thing with the deer and everything. When you control a population, it's healthier than if you just let everything live.
Right. Well, and there's more humane ways to do things, and you know what I mean? Each case is totally different, obviously. If all of a sudden you're looking and you're like, look, I got this alligator in a community where there's a bunch of children and there's other animals that could be harmed. Mm-hmm. If you can kill it in a humane way and then sell it.
Absolutely.
Exactly. It's kind of like you got to look at everything case by case, obviously.
Yes, and I've accepted that fact. I just don't want people to get the wrong idea that I'm just a trapper like any other trapper that's going to kill them.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I guess I can definitely tell for myself from hanging out with you, especially off mic before too. Like, yeah, you're not out there just to kill animals and stuff. You're out there to educate people. You're out there to have fun and see these things because you love the animals. That's the point, is that you love being around these animals. Obviously, you don't want to get rid of them.
Absolutely.
So I always ask this at the end of my show, just because I think that, I mean, you're super unique, obviously.
Thank you.
But people who are pursuing things that they're passionate about rather than their regular corporate job, they typically get to have some really, really cool experiences. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me about an experience that you're really grateful that you've had, but it only happened because you're choosing to do this?
Definitely the shark experience, but it all kind of adds up to that, because if I didn't go with some of my buddies, we wouldn't be catching snakes in the Everglades, and everything just worked out good for me to be able to do this. And I don't know, I can't think of a individual story that would like just plant me. It all kind of like was little things that added up to it.
Sure.
And it just gets more and more intense, like, and it's not done. Like, there's so much more I want to do. Like, Florida is very good, but there's a whole other world out there of dangerous animals. Like, I want to go to Australia for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying. I mean, I travel internationally usually relatively often, but this year not so much. So people usually end up making mistakes, right? Like, people end up messing up.
Yes.
Like you were saying, you took a risk maybe with the sharks you didn't need to at the time or whatever. Can you tell me about a mistake that you made that taught you something that hopefully somebody else could learn from?
My biggest mistake is not making YouTube videos earlier and not making these videos earlier, because I could have been, for sure. I could have done. I feel like I'm being held back right now. I could be making way better videos, but I'm gonna get to the point where I'm gonna be able to make the best content. I just need to be able to work at it. And my biggest mistake, I would say, probably that shark. That's one thing I'm like kind of ashamed of, because I was kind of a weenie. no, like I wouldn't say I was a complete weenie, but like, I just felt like I failed because like I'm supposed to be the, animal guy. I jump right into the water, but I've never swam with a bunch of very hungry bull sharks. So that was definitely a humbling experience for me, but it doesn't make me not want to go back. I definitely want to do that again. And I definitely want to swim with sharks more often so I can learn the behavior, because the more time I spend with the animal, the better I can learn it.
Yeah, ultimately it's about being, a little bit more educated and experienced before you put yourself in too risky of a situation, right? Like if something's going to be dangerous and risky anyways, you might as well put yourself like in the most knowledgeable, best position moving into it before you take that risk.
It probably won't get much worse than that. I still want to swim with great whites and some of the most dangerous sharks and everything. Like if I get an opportunity to, I totally will. But I want to be able to do it safely. Because I don't want to die out there. I have like a fear of getting killed by a shark.
Wow. Yeah, I think we all do, right?
I think people overthink the whole shark thing, though, because sharks really, like, if you see them in their natural habitat, they're not after you, man. You look like something you look alien to them. They're not looking at you to eat you when they see you. They just, they'll come and investigate you. They're curious. They'll come and check you out and everything. So I don't want people to think that sharks are out there to get them, because they never are.
Yeah.
And whenever a shark does bite you, it just thinks you're something else. It's not trying to feed on you.
Yeah, well, so I'm a scuba diver, and it's like I've learned that through that too, right? Because I've dove in Thailand and I've dove in Hawaii and stuff and the Keys. And it's like, I always try to explain to people, because they tell me like, are you worried about sharks? And I'm like, well, look, in general, animals only attack for a couple of reasons, right? They attack, one, if they're hungry because you're prey. Well, humans aren't natural prey for like anything. So nothing's going to attack you because it's hungry, unless it's like incredibly, incredibly desperate, I suppose. They attack you because they're scared and they're trying to defend themselves. Like that's realistically what's happening. So as long as you're not trying to threaten it's not going to threaten you, because you're not natural food for them in the first place.
And that's the same thing with alligators. Like people think every alligator is trying to eat them, when 90% of the alligators I've seen, they don't want anything to do with you. When you come up to the edge of the water, they see you, they either go under or stay away. But alligators are very different. Like alligators, every animal has a different personality. Like one alligator will be more shy than the next alligator. Sometimes just naturally. Sometimes people haven't even taught them behaviors, and one alligator will be extremely friendly, and some will be like more like a feeding behavior. And I can tell when they're presenting feeding behavior towards me, because I've been in the edge of the water and seen an alligator check me out from far away and come up from underneath and then surface closer, and that's when they're checking you out that you're potential prey. And an alligator, they don't know any better. They sense movement in the water, and they just come over to see it. Like baby alligators will eat bobbers, and like you throw a rock in the water and they'll come and check out the water movement because they think it's prey. So yeah, a lot of people think they're always out to get them, when 90% of the time alligators, they're not after you. But they can be extremely dangerous, so don't get me wrong with that, because if you have a nesting mama alligator, that's the time when they will pursue you. I've been like I was saying, if we have time, I can tell you the wetland story of when I got attacked by an alligator.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we were cleaning out this one retention pond, and if you've ever seen a retention pond in Florida that has a big fence around it, a lot of the times it will be completely covered with cattails. And we were sent out there to control these cattails, because they just completely overtook the pond, which keeps the water from filling into the pond properly and draining properly, and the cattails just clog it all up. So we're in there to spray the cattails and then chop them down with a machete. So I'm just carrying this heavy spray bag with this machete, and I use machetes all the time. I love machetes, and I'm just chopping it down, having a good time. And I'm with a few guys that are less experienced. They're from up north and everything, but they got this job, and they're with me, and they feel fine. And they start hearing squeaking sound, and they're like, "Oh, those are baby alligators." And I'm like, "No, man, those are probably frogs. I didn't hear the sound. I just assumed, probably frogs." It is nesting season, but I haven't seen any signs of alligators, so we're fine. And we keep cutting this pond down, and we're about waist deep water. There's no easy escape. We're kind of like in the and we're in the middle of it. Have all the cattails cut down besides this one area, and I see this little bit of debris on top of it, and I'm like, "Oh man, that kind of looks like a nest." And I see all these little alligators all around me all at once, and I hear them. I'm like, I finally heard the sound, the little alligator call, And I'm like, oh no. I'm like, we're in the middle of an alligator nest. And I tell them, I'm like, hey, everybody, I'm like, I'll finish up this section. You guys can go to shore because this isn't safe for you, because they're not going to know what to do if the mama comes. And sure enough, I'm like, all right, I don't see the mom, and that's bad. You don't want to be in the middle of the pond and not know where the gator is. You're safer if you know where it is, because then you know where to not walk, because it could be straight in front of me. Well, sure enough, I finished up this section, and I'm like, where's this mom? I need to be able to get out of here safely. So I walk up to a baby alligator, and I just pick it up, and it makes the alarm call, and like calls the mom. And all of a sudden, all I see is just a big wake of cattails pushing from the other side of the pond, just shooting over to me. And it got to me in seconds. And it shoots out of the water and bites at me and comes inches from my face. And I ducked and got around it. And I wasn't freaking out, but I knew I was in a very dangerous situation. Even though I'm an alligator handler, it's still like when you're in the cattails and you're carrying a spray pack, you cannot escape this thing. And when it's in its own environment, it's way faster than you. So I had this machete, and a lot of people would try to hit the alligator with the machete. That wouldn't stop the alligator. That would just make it attack you. I held the machete like it was my arm, held it to the alligator's face to make it look at this machete like, oh, look, here it is and everything. And I held the machete out to him, and he would focus on the machete and keep biting at the machete, and I would pull it away. So if he bit the machete and realized it was just metal, he would focus on me. So I would pull it away so he couldn't get it, but he would keep striking at it. And all I'm doing is slowly backing up. And the second I made it to shore, I thought the alligator would stop, and it chased me up the bank. But then I'm safe because I'm on the land. So then I just touched her tail, and she started spinning around me and everything. And very fast alligators, smaller alligators ranging from, this was probably a 7-foot alligator, and that's not that big, but alligators ranging from 6 to 7 feet are very quick, and they're the most likely to bite you because they're quick. Like the big alligator, like when a big alligator comes at you, it's a big slow jump at you on land. They're real slow and clumsy out of the water. But a little one is agile, and it can definitely get a hold of you. So it was jumping all around me, and I just walked up the bank and let her go. And she had her baby, and her baby kind of like was riding on her back on the way back, because she swam back to her babies, and the babies kind of climbed up on her back, and she just kind of went off.
See, I like to think about like up at my cabin where it's on a lake and we have loons up there, and you see like the little babies riding in the back of the loons. See, that's cute. I don't know about an alligator
That's
attacking
adorable.
me and then having its baby. Not
it was
so
just
cute.
protecting its baby.
No, I get it. That's crazy. All right. Well, anyways, now that we're at the end of the show, anybody that wants to, again, why don't you give the plug of how they can follow you, and in general, like how can people best support you moving forward?
I would say just check me out. Just watch my videos and everything. That's about all I can say. I'm sure you guys will end up seeing me in the long run when I start getting everything together and I start actually making videos on YouTube. That's like my goal, not a major goal, but a goal that I need to accomplish this year for sure, is start making some YouTube videos. So you can find me at Fishing Garrett, but that's about it.
Perfect. Any last words? Any shout outs or anything else that you gotta give?
I would like to shout out one of my buddies, and he's been with me along the way catching snakes and everything. His name is Caveman Sharker on Instagram. I'm not sure if there's any details to that, but I'm sure if you look up Caveman Sharker, you'll be able to find it. And JJ Swamp King. And these two guys are the guys that I go and catch the snakes with and do a lot of this stuff that I do. And they're just as good as me.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Passion Pod. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll see you soon.